On Friday, March 27, 2026, something quietly historic happened in Ouagadougou. Inside the hall of the Transitional Legislative Assembly, deputies cast their ballots unanimously. No dissent. No abstentions. Secret ballot. And with that vote, Burkina Faso ceased to be a country in transition. It became, at least in the language of its own government, a country in revolution. The document they adopted is called the Charter of the Revolution. It replaces the earlier charter of the transitional period, which had governed the country since Captain Ibrahim Traoré seized power in September 2022. But this is not simply a name change. Embedded in the new charter is a provision that changes everything about how we should read Traoré's political future. Article 4 of the document states clearly that the President of Burkina Faso is eligible to run in presidential, legislative and municipal elections once the revolutionary period concludes. In simple terms, Ibrahim Traoré, the 37-year-old captain who came to power through a coup, has now given himself a legal pathway to win power through a ballot. To understand why this matters, we need to step back to September 2022. Burkina Faso had already lived through one military takeover that year. In January, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba removed the elected president, Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, promising to stabilize a country overwhelmed by jihadist violence. But just 8 months later, Damiba himself was pushed out by his own subordinate. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, barely in his 30s, accused Damiba of failing to protect the people and announced himself as the new leader of the patriotic movement for safeguard and restoration. Like every coup leader before him, Traoré promised the transition would be short. Elections would restore civilian rule by July 2024. That deadline came and went. In May 2024, following national consultations that were largely boycotted by political parties and civil society groups, a new charter extended the transition by 60 months from July 2024. That meant no elections before 2029 at the earliest. The same charter allowed Traoré to run in the eventual vote. Critics called it exactly what it looked like: a junta formalizing its own permanence. What happened this week is the next chapter of that same story, only now the language has been upgraded. The word transition is gone. What was the Transitional Legislative Assembly is now the Legislative Assembly of the People. What was the transitional government is now the government of the people. And the entire political project has been rebranded around the word revolution. Why does language matter so much in this context? Because the word transition carries a promise. It implies impermanence, a temporary arrangement on the road back to something else. Revolution implies purpose. It suggests that what is happening is not an interruption of politics but the creation of a new political order entirely. In April 2025, Traoré stated publicly that Burkina Faso was, in his words, no longer in a democracy, but rather in a progressive people's revolution. The new charter makes that declaration constitutional. It does not just describe where Burkina Faso is. It shapes where Burkina Faso is allowed to go. The preamble of the charter weaves in concepts that have defined Traoré's public identity since 2022: national defense, popular patriotic participation, and national sovereignty. Gone is any language rooted in a return to democratic norms. The framework now treats sovereignty, not elections, as the animating principle of governance. And then there is the man himself. Ibrahim Traoré is not a figure who fits neatly into the mold of Africa's old guard military rulers. He is young. He is visually distinct, almost never seen without his red beret. He is active on social media. And he has cultivated a persona that resonates with a specific and growing audience: young Africans and diaspora communities who are tired of what they see as Western-imposed political templates and the lingering structures of colonialism. Traoré has expelled French forces from Burkina Faso, severing a military relationship that went back to independence. He has turned to Russia for security partnerships. He has pulled Burkina Faso out of ECOWAS alongside Mali and Niger, framing the withdrawal as an act of continental self-determination. He declared in late 2025 that Burkina Faso had achieved food self-sufficiency, a claim that resonated powerfully domestically even where it was met with skepticism abroad. Inside Burkina Faso, particularly among youth, soldiers, and rural communities, his support is real. His nationalistic rhetoric fills a vacuum left by decades of governance that failed to translate political stability into security or economic dignity for ordinary citizens. His critics, including Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the Civicus Monitor, tell a different story. They document arbitrary arrests, forced disappearances, the silencing of journalists, the suspension and eventual dissolution of all political parties, and the conscription of dissidents into the army. Burkina Faso's civic space rating has been downgraded to repressed, the second worst category. And about half of the country's territory remains outside government control, still contested by armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. These two realities, the popular hero and the authoritarian consolidator, coexist inside the same man. The revolution charter does not resolve that tension. It deepens it. What does Traoré's potential candidacy actually mean in practice? First, we should note that no election date has been announced. The charter does not set one. The elections, when they come, will mark what the government calls the completion of the revolution. That could mean 2029. Could mean later. It could mean sooner if, as the earlier charter noted, the security situation permits. Second, the environment in which those elections would take place has been fundamentally altered. All political parties were dissolved by a Council of Ministers decree in January 2026. The Independent National Electoral Commission was dissolved in July 2025, with its functions transferred to the Ministry of Territorial Administration. The criteria for selecting parliamentary deputies has shifted away from political representation toward what the charter describes simply as patriotism. What this means is that if and when elections happen, they will not look like the elections Burkina Faso has known before. There will be no opposition parties as they were once understood. There will be no independent electoral body overseeing the count. The institutional architecture of competitive democracy has been methodically dismantled. In that context, Traoré's eligibility to run is less a concession to electoral politics than an integration of electoral form into a revolutionary framework. He would not be running against a functioning opposition. He would be running within a system he has built around himself. Regionally, the implications reach beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Together with Mali and Niger, Burkina Faso has formed the Alliance of Sahel States, a new bloc explicitly positioned as an alternative to ECOWAS and as a vehicle for what Traoré calls total African sovereignty. At the end of 2025, Traoré assumed the chairmanship of this alliance. His consolidation of domestic power only strengthens his hand as a regional voice. ECOWAS, for its part, has taken cautious steps toward reconciliation with the three member states that walked away. But any rapprochement has to contend with the fact that the leaders of all three countries are now writing new foundational documents for themselves rather than charts back to civilian rule. The African Union, the United Nations, and the European Union face a choice that human rights organizations have been pressing them to make. Whether continued passivity in the face of democratic dismantling carries a cost, or whether geopolitical calculations about stability and counterterrorism will continue to soften the response. For now, the response has been measured. And measured responses, in the Sahel's recent political history, have generally been interpreted as green lights. What we witnessed on March 27, 2026 was not a dramatic moment. There were no crowds in the streets, no state television spectacle, no sweeping speech. A parliament voted unanimously. A charter was adopted. A new name was given to an ongoing project. But the implications are substantial. A man who came to power through the barrel of a gun has now been handed, by his own legislature, the legal right to seek a democratic mandate. The country he governs has formally abandoned the language of transition. The institutions that might have checked his power have been dissolved. And the elections that might measure his legitimacy against genuine competition will take place, if they take place in a landscape of his own design. Whether Ibrahim Traoré ultimately becomes Burkina Faso's first revolutionary president or whether the weight of insecurity, internal pressure, or regional developments changes that trajectory, nobody can say with certainty. What is certain is that on March 27, the game changed. The revolution has a ballot now. And the man who started it intends to be on it.